Hi, and welcome back to the C86 podcast. Today's episode is all about the real state of hospitality, the stuff that doesn't always make it into reports or LinkedIn posts. I'm joined by Adam Tuttle, hospitality consultant and operator behind Yippee.io. Adam's worked across the industry for years, including times in hotels at the sharp end, and now spends his days helping operators untangle the mess of people, systems, suppliers, and all of it. This is going to be a career retrospective. It's a proper conversation about what's actually going on in hospitality right now, what's broken, what's fixable, and what operators are quietly dealing with every day. So Adam, a very warm welcome. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much, Tim. Today is a wonderful day, and I'm so happy that I get to be here with you.
Yeah, and you're joining us from Florida, where, it's sunshine versus here in Britain, where it's freezing cold and raining. But anyway, great to have you with us. So before we get into anything too serious, how would you describe hospitality right now?
Well, I would say hospitality is in a moment of flux.
You know, it's interesting you say that because I've obviously spoken to various people on the podcasts and a couple of people in America, and they say something similar. And I'm glad it's not just here in Britain, because here in Britain right now, you know, we've got so many challenges with staffing, taxation. It's been a really challenging time for the market, and I get the impression it's been for the same for the States. What's something about people outside the industry that completely misunderstand about hotels and hospitality, do you think?
I think that what people that are outside of the industry don't really recognize and understand is just how complex this industry truly is in terms of how hotels are run and managed and owned. I often find myself telling people, look, the hotel you're staying at may be part of a brand which has its own unique sub-brand, which is run by a management company, which is owned by another individual, which is hired contract labor. So the intricacies of who you're actually being, staying with, I think is often most of our guests are completely oblivious to the complexities that exist within hospitalities, and even in what appears to be a very simple, basic building may in fact be actually run and operated by 4 or 5 different entities, which is incredible. So most people outside of the industry don't see into that complexity at all. What they see is, I booked a Marriott, I'm staying at a Marriott, should be my stay, right? And so when people realize, oh my gosh, like this is a machine full of many cogs and wheels working together, not just operationally, to deliver, room service or cleaning the room, but just to the property functionality. How much is going into that to even, have the doors open, I think is very shocking to people.
Yeah, and you touched on it just then about, obviously hotels having a variety of owners. I mean, franchising, I know, is big in the US, and I imagine you deal with franchises as part of your day-to-day role. I mean, what challenges do you find are coming up with that?
I think that franchising, when we look at franchises in the world of hospitality, it's still very relatively new. I mean, franchised hospitality really started taking off in the 1940s, 1950s, at least within the United States. And so it's still very new. And what we've seen is, we saw these, pop-ups, of all these different franchised groups within hospitality that have now snowballed into these ginormous conglomerates, right? We're looking at Marriott with their huge global reach, right? We look at, when that merger of Starwood and Marriott happened, we look at Hilton and Wyndham and, how much they're accumulating. And I think that what we're seeing is, and why I articulate this flux is, we have this broad understanding of these large and momentum of these large brand companies, but also in there is just such a large segmentation within their own brands, right? So when you look at Marriott with dozens of brands, it's starting to get, okay, how does this operate? What's the differentiation? What's the actual difference between these hotels? And what does the guest really want from this? And is there really loyalty to the segment, or is it more loyalty to the parent company? And so it's really been interesting to start to dissect that and to see what the guest trends are, and also what ownership trends are of which brands get adopted and get flagged or for use. So really an interesting market right now.
And would you say in the last 5 years things have changed? Because they have over here, and again, I talked on a previous podcast about Gen Z obviously coming into the equation and the requirements and differences they have. And in fact, one hotelier I spoke to said that, Gen Z now, when they check into a hotel, one of the first things the kids do is check how many PowerPoints and how many, USB points they've got for their laptop, their phone, their iPad. And also the challenges of design that are happening now. I mean, in your world, what things would you say have been kind of the top priorities that have changed over the last 3 or 4 years?
Oh, that's so great. And I love coming to this from a reality standpoint. As a hotel operator, I always wanted, let's make sure the room is great. Let's make sure it's easy, clean bed, make sure everything's perfect. Great. Now, when I'm traveling, it's much more from a business perspective, right? When I'm traveling with hotels and I'm looking around and I look at what do I need? But more importantly, what I really want to focus on is I have 4 kids, and checking into a hotel with 4 boys is a wild experience. First of all, I don't recommend it for anyone. But at the same time, we just checked out of a hotel the other day and we walked in with my kids. And to your point, we walked in and the outlets were the desk, the lamps, right? Where the outlets were available, the lamp. And all of my kids went, oh man. And I went, what's wrong? And they said, oh, we got those lamp outlets again. Like those things never work. I can't plug in any of my chargers, my switches, all this stuff. And I'm looking over and they're all huddled over. My oldest, I kid you not, I can't make this up. My oldest brought a power strip. Like he packed it in his bag so he could plug it in. And all of my kids, we look over and they've got all their devices plugged into this power strip because it drains, from the flights and stuff. And I've got, 5 iPads and switches and, all the other stuff. And I just look over and I go, this is totally different. Like the market is changing. And I think that, yes, the technology adoption is there, but I'm also been really interested in watching the environmental impact that hospitality has been taking into consideration, and then also the impact that that's having on with guests and travelers, right? As we go through, I was just speaking with another hotel and we were looking at guest reviews, and they were like, okay, I'm in a bit of a conundrum because my guests don't like that they have a large bottle of shampoo and conditioner. But they also said that being eco-friendly was their number one, point of interest. So what do I do here? How do I deliver both of these? And so I think our market is just, again, why I say we're in such flux, because we have such an emerging generation of coming in that has very strong demands, very strong technical expectations. There should be an app. I shouldn't have to, what do you mean? I got to call somebody? What are you talking about? And then on the other side, there's also traditional hotel hotel guests that are saying, where's the service going? Where's, the touch points? Where's the elegance? Where's the elements of service that actually make me feel like I'm staying at a hotel? I was reading an article that there's hotels considering getting rid of their shampoo and conditioner.
Wow.
What? Like, I wouldn't know what to do if I checked in. I would just, where's the convenience store? I have to go buy shampoo and conditioner. But they said, they don't want to use our general brand. And so again, what we're seeing is this change in hospitality. And I think that what is a huge driver of this, and sorry for talking so long on it, but is that we have given so much options to the guests that there's such diversification now within the industry that there really is almost something for everyone. And then what ends up happening is when we cross our segment or cross our expectations, okay, I was staying at this, segment of hospitality or this style of brand or whatever that may be, and I go to another one, why don't they do that? I expect that they should have this as well. And so then there becomes this blend of what really is the expectation and how do we really, really deliver things that are satisfactory to our guests.
Yeah, and what do you find, when you go into a new project, you probably sit down with the general manager or the operations manager, director. What are some of the things that you're kind of saying, or they're saying to you, should I say, these are our kind of problems at the moment, and that perhaps you're finding consistent across a variety of brands and groups?
Our job, which is a really great question, our main, and my main role at Yippee is to help leaders specifically identify what are your expectations? What are the things that we have got to nail how do we scale that, right? Because most hospitality operations that are struggling or are finding challenges, it's not primarily because they don't have defined standards and expectations. It's that there's not a system in place in their operation, both from a technology standpoint, but from an operational standpoint, system that allows these leaders to truly digest what are all of the expectations. When I started, when you asked me the first question, what might be shocking, when you look at a hotel and we look at the standards and the requirements that every operator has to, abide by, there may be multiple sets. And we're talking brands have expectations where the government, depending on your country or your region or your county, whatever it may be, they're going to have specific requirements that you need to meet that are regulatory. Your city may also have regulatory things. You may be going after some accolade of, maybe Forbes or some stars or some environmental accolade that will come with their own requirements. And so the first step really is meeting with these leaders and saying, okay, let's digest and define what all these expectations are. And let's really start looking at what does executing these with precision and excellence really look like for you? Because really when it comes down to, we're not failing or we're not struggling because we don't have the expectations, right? Whether they're from the guest or as defined through standards, but we're struggling or failing or missing or feeling the pain because we have an execution gap between what is expected and what we're delivering. And that comes from labor shortages, training, that comes from onboarding, deficiencies, and then just the sheer lack that our industry is such an oral history, type industry that it's hard to even nail down. Okay, we have these defined expectations, but they never really make it out onto the floor, right? They struggle. So that's what we really work with to start with these leaders on getting those controlled.
And would you say that the challenges you have with those is down to costs? Is it people? Is it systems? Because I know obviously the systems side of hotels are changing, with the amount of tech that's now being brought in. Where would you say the biggest kind of issue is that you're having to tackle when you first go into a project, I guess?
And this is the unfair thing for hospitality, is it's all of this. It's everything that you just said, Tim, because when we look at hospitality, I was just at an HR conference for hotels in November, October, and they put up a stat that genuinely blew my mind, that our industry globally is facing an 80% turnover average year over year on line level employment. So when we think I've got to turn over my staff at our 80% rate and onboard them and train them and teach them, of course there's a huge cost. Of course there's a huge, again, this execution gap, really looking at how do I get people to come in, understand what those expectations are, and get in. And again, to our benefit and to our detriment, to get you on board on 13, 14 new systems, right? Okay, this is the system for checking guests in. Okay, but if a guest wants to text you or talk to you, you got to go over to this system and deal with that. And this is how we check revenue, or this is the system you use to know what room you're going to clean. And so what happens is as we are inviting people into our industry, we're also inviting them into a level of chaos. What is that property dealing with? And so it goes back to, like I was saying, the first step is, what is the system, and not from a technology standpoint, but from an operational and execution standpoint, what is the system that exists within your property to onboard a team member, teach them the expectations, get them trained in all of the technology, all of the systems, understand and digest the culture, and then be able to be competent in those things enough that they can be confident in their guest engagement, right? Because what ends up happening is the new people that are joining, or people that are even seasoned in our industry, we're so focused on, okay, am I meeting the expectations? Am I using the system right? Am I doing all of the steps, that a lot of our brain power gets consumed by checking the box and doing the step versus engaging with the guest and creating the moment and the memory and the interaction that hospitality is known for, right? The whole reason we're in this industry. And so I think that when we look at what is the tsunami or the challenge that's in front of us, it truly is a tidal wave of all of that. And the breaker, so to speak, truly is, do we have a system in place in our property to help us define, distribute, do, right, all of those things? And then can we diagnose and develop our team members after that? And we do those 5 things effectively, and that's what we need to work with hoteliers to really define within budget, within time constraints, within labor efficiencies. But if you have the system, I'm not lying, and I might sound crazy here, but I've done it enough with enough properties. Those become more excuses if you don't have the system, because if you have the system, you can overcome many of those excuses or those challenges because you have a process and a system in place that allows you to overcome it.
And how do you think these systems, and I'm sure these systems have been very effective in the past, and I'm sure they still are today, how are they kind of working with technology? I mean, do you think these days the industry is over-tooled? You know, we've got too many kind of gadgets around us that take away and are detrimental to service and staff retention? Or do you think it's kind of helping the industry elevate with those tools as support?
Let me answer it this way. Again, I have 4 kids. One of my favorite things to witness as a parent is watching kids walk the first time, and listening to them learn how to speak, right? And a quick anecdote to this is my youngest, who was 6, he went to kindergarten, and gosh dang it, they taught him to spell his name right. And it made me so mad because, gosh, that was so cute before, right? And I bring this up because that is where our industry is. We are in this weird learning to walk stage where there's lots of fumbling, there's lots of falling down. We've adopted a ton of system. Technology is being thrown at our industry. And I think that the reason is here is we, as an industry in hospitality, we cowered from it for a very long time. We shied away. We rejected hospitality technology in the early adoption phase of technology, where other industries, they embraced it, they engaged it. And so they were able to, get these legacy systems more in place. And our industry, we had this fear of robots taking over, it's going to lose the hospitality touch. And so now, yes, we're completely over inundated. There's too many systems, there's too many apps, there's too many things. I'm at a hotel right now, I'm doing an implementation. The first thing the general manager did and stood up and he said, okay, I know this is another app. I know this is another system. Don't hate me. Like, he literally said that, and he said, or the director of operations, and he said, but I promise this one is different and it's going to help us, right? And everybody, you could almost see like the eye rolls, right? Of, oh my gosh, I've got to learn another thing. But I think what's going to come out of this is us learning to walk. This is us learning as an industry what works, what's actually needed, what are the systems that are actually moving our industry forward. And then we'll look at a consolidation as integrations begin to happen. And we're going to look at that. I mean, I look at, how the evolution of the PMS has really evolved from just checking people in now and how much more it can do. And that's because we consolidated those systems, but we had to go through that awkward phase of having too many, understand what was symbiotic and what truly exists on its own. And when we can understand the symbiosis that exists within our industry and our operations and what the technologies can bring, that's really where our industry then benefits and evolves.
And do you think, you use technology every day. Do you think if I had a magic wand, here is a system that I would put in place that I can't believe doesn't exist already? Is there something that you kind of go, God, it would make me a billionaire overnight?
Yeah, I'm building it. It's called Yippee.
Yeah, I forgot about
that. But the idea here is when I look at hospitality, and I'll kind of be tongue in cheek with this, is the first thing is I'm now a tech founder and building a system in hospitality because I looked around and said, why hasn't anybody done this? We've got robots delivering room service, and I've got guests that can check in without ever even coming by the front desk. How do I not have something that helps hotels manage their standards? That's wild. But I think if there was a system, one system that the guests could use from searching for a reservation, and I'm getting into agentic AI here, but a system that allows a guest to take them through their search, through their stay in an unbroken experience is a magic system. Right? That's my magic wand. Really, do I have brand loyalty? Sometimes, but it really comes down to cost and location and all of those things. And so when I have that, I really want to have one system that I'm allowed to do that. Now, I'm also, I might make some enemies here, but I'm not, the biggest fan of OTAs. I like my money to go to the hotel as much as I possibly can. And I try to always book directly in every option that I can. And so I think there's an argument that OTAs can provide that. But I think that as we evolve and as we look through agentic AI and we look through, all of this, I think that is going to be the system that guests are going to really adopt and crave, and they're going to, whoever does it successfully and be able to, create friendly relationships with all of the brands.
Because I guess, yeah, no, it makes perfect sense, and yeah, it has to happen. I mean, otherwise it just becomes so complicated, and yeah, kind of neglects the customer. Now, if we look at procurement, I mean, why do you think hospitality is a tough industry to purchase within? Because I know for a fact, we've all got a little black book of suppliers that we've worked with in the past, but suppliers aren't always competitive about what they're doing. Sometimes they become lethargic in the service they're giving. How do you find procurement within the hotel world, and I guess generally out there?
Because when we look at the industry, again, hospitality is beyond all things business of relationships. It's a business of, oh my gosh, there's this story that is a famed story of why Marriott is Pepsi over Coke, right? It was, early days, they made a phone call to their Coke rep and they needed they needed Coke delivered for this really important event, and Coke said, sorry, I can't get there. And they made another call, and Pepsi said, how many cases do you need? I'm going to be right there. And look, okay, now they've got Pepsi, right? So we can never neglect the impact of the relationship. But what's interesting is it goes back to the globalization of hospitality. And I think that the brands have played a really big piece in this, in that when we're looking at procurement, many times we want consistency across our experience, but yet we also have regional, local, and brand specific differences that exist. Right? Like the amenities or the type of offerings I'm going to get in a hotel in Japan is going to be different than what I'm going to get in Romania versus what I get in the United States, and how it should look and feel. And so sometimes those relationships and that we have with suppliers obviously have to be fragmented, and they have to be done from different places. But yet everyone's trying to create something that is almost identical, right? Across and again, sucking the soul out of it almost. And so I think that there's a particularly challenging point right now with procurement in hospitality to deliver to hotels something that feels unique, something that feels authentic, something that provides a sense of place and a sense of journey, but also becomes scalable for large-scale purchases. And the relationships, especially in hospitality procurement, it is a slow adoption, right? Our renovation cycles are not a 5-year cycle. They're expanding to 8, 10-year, 15-year cycles. And so what ends up happening is, okay, the providers that I've had with other things, they don't even make or distribute effectively the new technology or the new things that I need, right? That are accommodating our new guests. And so now I have to find new suppliers. I have to find new, relationships, or that supplier has to evolve. And sometimes they're just unwilling to, right? And their prices are up and they're slow, or they take for granted, good luck getting out of our contract and our deal because I supply, the entire European continent with tools. It's just like, oh man, how am I going to get somebody else, right? And so I think that there's a lot of handcuffs. And again, that's speaking very much to the branded side. But if I can speak also to the independent side, that because many of these suppliers, these large global contracts, or they are the suppliers across these different things, it's very difficult for independent hotels or people that don't have these large, agreements, but find product that is built or specifically fits their needs at a price that's reasonable because they don't need the independent hotel. They've got the big contracts. So yeah, this is the price. And so then that of course affect the efficiency and, the bottom line effectively with these smaller boutique and independent hotels.
And what do you feel has kind of broken down between operators and suppliers? Because I know in the past it was very much about relationships. They'd stick with the same supplier for 10 years. And now things have slowly started to change. I mean, do you think relationships is as important with suppliers as perhaps it used to be 10, 15 years ago?
I think it's as important, but I know for a fact that a very good friend of mine, and I was doing work with her, and she's a director of housekeeping at a Four Seasons hotel, and she needed something and she bought it on Amazon. And it was like, I need this right now. My supplier is not going to get it to me for a little, a different time. And so it's interesting on how are we as an industry and as brands and as companies saying, okay, how are we fluctuating within what the brand expectation is or what, and when I say brand, I don't want us to confuse that with large mega brands. I mean, a brand also exists in independent hospitality, right? If you're a single hotel, you have your own brand. So what is the brand and what is it I'm supposed to be doing? And so I think that there's a disruption now because it used to be I needed to kind of know what you had and you gave me your catalog and I kind of picked out of what you had. I can see what everybody has. I can go on and I can look. The competitive market now is so visual that it really comes down to, can I purchase without, or am I constantly looking? Because hotel owners are constantly driving, as they should, right? I mean, hospitality is a business. They're constantly saying, where can we save the dime? Where can we save, the penny here? And so as that happens, and as we shrink and as we are more global in our search for product, those relationships also then maybe don't stand as strong because ultimately when it comes down to it, it comes down to price and quickly it can get to me.
And are you finding, once again, I was speaking to one hotelier about the hotel industry in particular, and he used the word oversaturation. And do you think that's happening the same with suppliers? Because we've got on our database, we've probably got over 60 different varieties of EPOS providers. And, is it a similar situation out there in the States where these companies are kind of just battling against each other? And obviously some are finding it harder than others.
Total oversaturation. I mean, just, again, it's no longer, you can't find this. It's more of death by which one and who has it. I mean, I was reading a study on the decision-making process in Americans. It is absolutely interesting how many decisions are made off of a 1 cent or 2 cent price difference. The study specifically came in, looking at Amazon, the people that were looking at nearly identical products, but would take time to deliberate. And we're talking 10, 15 minutes, like looking through reviews and things off of products that were priced 2 cents differently. And they were weighing that. And so because of our visualization of those, there's so much oversaturation of product, which then allows us to be, the price discrepancy is so much smaller that it almost becomes, paralyzing for people to make a choice. And what they end up doing is just going, okay, let me go in the smallest one, but it's totally oversaturated, 100%.
And have you had circumstances where a supplier comes to you and says, listen, we're going to give you, as you say, a cent off this or cent off that, and you could decide to go with it, or your clients do, and look back and regret it for whatever reason? Has that often occurred?
I think it does. I think it says, hey, are we really satisfied with this? I always throw caution to the wind or not caution to the wind. I always say this is that you get what you pay for, right? And so sometimes we are narrow-minded in our budget meetings, and we think, okay, I want to buy this and I want to save the money. So we buy the product that really isn't suited for what our expectation is. So it kind of goes back to, funny enough, the system. It goes back to what is it that we want our guests to experience? And does this product, does this person, does whatever it is, does that fully align into what I'm trying to deliver as a property or as a brand, right? Does that fit into my system? And can I define my standards clear enough so that as I'm making purchasing decisions, okay, it has to meet these qualities so that we don't have that remorse, right? That we get something we think, oh man, we've all bought something off Temu and thought, it looked great, but this is terrible.
Yeah. Yeah, that is frequently the case. Okay, a quick break to tell you about our sponsor, Say86. If you're a supplier or support service navigating procurement, Say86 makes the process clearer, simpler, and more efficient. With coverage of over 200 sectors, they connect the right partners, cut through the unnecessary complexity, and help you focus on delivering quality. If procurement feels harder than it should be, it might be time to say Say86. Check it out at www.say86.com. Okay, back to it, Adam. Well, hotels often feel like they should be better set up than restaurants. How have you found the restaurant-hotel relationship and how they partner and some challenges within both?
I think it's a very symbiotic relationship in hospitality and restaurants. And I'm loving to see, the merger of independent restaurants and hospitality coming together, realizing that they're all serving the same, things. But I think it benefits us when we're looking, especially from a procurement standpoint, when we can, again, define what is it that we want? What's the expectation? I mean, it's such a close-knit industry that they're so close together, but there is a fine line of the differences there of what, a standalone restaurant is needed and food and beverage operations within a hotel need. But obviously, when you're in a hotel, there's much more, larger buying power behind that than singular restaurants. So I think that as we look at this merger and as we look at the industry really coming together there, I think that there's a lot of symbiosis there. And I love that we get to be seeing it. And I think that if you're servicing one of these segments, it's almost, you'd be daft not to look at the other one, right? Like you've got to be looking at them, cross-laterally.
And behind the scenes, what kind of struggles does the hotel industry experience that maybe people as customers wouldn't expect in any way?
I think that it really comes down to customer is the one that knows. They're the ones that know and are going to drive the market. And ultimately, when it comes down to it, I feel like we often try to tell the customer what they want and what they need, but it really comes back to we've got to be better at listening as an industry of what is our customer base really telling us. And I think that if we are looking at from a customer standpoint, what's going to be surprising for them is the power that their voice to their to the businesses that they're frequenting. Say what you want, like really genuinely, authentically tell them when you like something, when you don't. How many times do people go places and they think, oh, I didn't like that, but I'm not going to say anything to be a disruption. No, please do. Please tell us. It's not that we're going to, go to the back and spit in your food, or, we're going to think terrible of you from the operations standpoint. But what might be surprising to customers is how valued that opinion actually is and how desperately it's wanted. And so that's what's going to really drive our industry. And so when we hear, we like this, we want this, it drives purchasing and procurement decisions. Hands down, it's what drives it. So I think it would be shocking to hear that even though something's not right, please let us know. Or if it's not your favorite, let us know. Or if it is, let us know so that we can make sure that we continue with the consistent delivery and excellence.
And what do you think the best operators will be doing differently over the next 3 to 5 years?
I think operators over the next 3 to 5 years need to do two things. I think they need to really, again, focus in on dissecting and understanding what their standards are, what their requirements are. And I think there needs to be a great focus in on there. And then the second part is we've got to look at our systems and we've got to look at, are we going to be really looking at connecting with our guest in the non-traditional face-to-face way, adopting the technology to create hospitable moments through less frequent, less interpersonal moments that will be more impactful. And so as we learn to adopt our technologies, we learn to interact with guests in a new digital way that is meaningful and worthwhile to our guests. It's a balance of these two things of what's the expectation, what are we hoping to deliver, how are we going to do that in the new technology.
And do you think there are things the industry keeps avoiding that it can't do really for much longer?
We can't stay as segmented as we are. I think that we're avoiding, I don't know if it's going to be called the great collapse or the great merge or something. I think our industry is too segmented. I think we're trying to define things too, and I just don't think our industry can support it. I don't think that operationally we can do it, and I don't think that guests can handle much more of what's the difference. Just let's reconsolidate here, and both from a service style perspective and from a technological standpoint, we've got to make a consolidation.
So it sounds like this kind of action that needs to take place, I mean, really excites you. You sound very enthusiastic about it. And if you had a magic wand today with the industry, what would you do if it was yours? The whole industry, let's say, you created it.
The magic wand that I really want is better guest feedback. I want to know it. I want to know it better, clearer. Our response rate for guests feedback is less than 2% across the industry. How do we get more? How do we really understand what does this guest want? And if I could have a magic wand, I'd really like something that gives me better guest feedback that's more frequent. Because really, ultimately, that's what it comes down to.
And typically, you mentioned 2 or 3% are kind of giving feedback. How are you finding out about that feedback? Is it primarily social media, or is it on websites? How are you getting that feedback?
Yeah, I think traditional survey tools are still the primary source of feedback. We're definitely seeing an increase in Google reviews, but we are seeing our more traditional feedback style still being the prominent way in which guests give us feedback.
So you've been in the trade. How long have you actually been doing this for now? We didn't actually ask that at the beginning.
Oh my gosh. I've been in the industry since I was 14 years old. But I've been running Yippee now for the last 4 years and consulting in the industry for the last 9 years.
Yeah, so actually tell me a little bit about Yippee. I mean, obviously I've done some research and I've seen it on the internet and some comments from other people, but tell me about it. How's it going? What's it about?
Yeah, Yippee is the industry's first hospitality standards management system. So our goal is to create and work with hospitality to, again, work within this system to help define what expectations are by having one central location for their standards and for all of the requirements, and standards being regulatory needs and requirements and service requirements, being able to then define those, distribute them throughout their organization based on role and responsibility, so everyone knows what they need to be doing and how they need to operate, and then focusing in on helping them execute effectively and delivering those. And then we have a very robust inspection system that allows you to inspect those expectations with data that then becomes usable and deliverable to leaders so they can diagnose and develop areas of strength for their team members to say, okay, where do we grow? What do I need to invest in, both from training and from product perspectives, and really what is it that I'm looking at? So Yippee truly is the first end-to-end standards management system help hoteliers take control of their own.
So you pretty much, how does it start? Do you go in and do an audit on the location and then say, right, these are the actions we're going to take? Or have you got a system that does all that for you? How does it work?
Yeah, we typically work with hotels. We implement this thing, and it's very much a self-auditing system. It's a tool that is given to properties so that they can use them and be effective with.
Yeah, and how wide is your business at the moment? I mean, you nationwide in the US, you're international. Because actually, you mentioned before we started, you were on the phone from somebody in Belgium.
Yep, we're fully global. We're all over the world, and still primarily heavily US and Europe based, but we are spread across 97 countries.
And how are you finding the difference in countries? Because I guess when you're speaking to someone in Asia, it's probably quite different to the US. How do you adapt yourself?
In that every region has their own particularities, and we have to be able to adjust to those. And that's what's the beauty about this system is it allows us to do that. It allows us to take in the regional differences and what it is that we actually need. So it's actually exactly why we exist is because those regional differences exist.
And the people I know in hospitality, I mean, certainly in the US, I spent some time out there. Hospitality is living and breathing as part of civilization out there. And you come to Europe, and it is to a certain extent. When you're in Asia, do you find it the same? How do you try and turn those systems and understanding of hospitality that you have in the US and look at it through their eyes and then try and, it's not a case of getting them to try and understand it, but get them to really work with it and maximize what your service is able to provide?
Well, I mean, and again, it goes back to every region is different. Every brand is different, not just from the US. I mean, hospitality is generally equal, but every region has specificities that have to be met, that we have to account for, and you have to have a system that allows you to take that in. And that's been the problem of our industry is it hasn't been adaptive to regional differences that have been right? It kind of says, here's how we do it, here's how you should do it. And that's got to change. It needs to be, here's how we do it, and here's how you can adopt it to make it make sense in your perspective.
And you go to places sometimes and think, these are really kind of inspirational tools they're using. Why didn't I think of it? I mean, are you still kind of, learning's not the right word, but are you picking up things when you travel that you think this is just, the business is evolving terrifically?
Every day. I love seeing how AI is being infused. I love seeing, oh my gosh, I love how you're doing your procurement. That's such a better way. Oh my gosh, I love how you're doing communicating with your guests. This is so much better, right? And so the technology, again, we have so much, but no one knows about it all. So it really comes down to word of mouth and what works, and the champions will rise.
And is there kind of a country or a nation, nation, I guess, or a city that's really standing out at the moment in terms of leading the way?
I think the Middle East is making huge progress. I think that we're seeing a lot in Hong Kong and Singapore. We're seeing a lot of technological adoption there. I think the US has been very slow on their adoption, and I think the UK market has also been a little bit slow on their technological advancements and adoptions. And that's obviously because of regulatory requirements and also just suspicion. Is this going to work? Is this a fad? But look, the earlier we adopt, the better we can go.
Okay, so that's it for today's podcast. Adam, thank you very much. I wish you and the guys at Yippee all the very best. And thanks so much for our listeners. If you enjoyed this episode, you can check us out on Spotify and follow along. And we'll be back soon.